I love Dog, dude.
I literally, I was thinking about Skeeter's dad.
What?
Who was just like, who's like an angry guy or whatever.
Right.
Like, you know, who's just like, "Argh!" I wanted to respond to Shane in the Discord with like a picture of him, but then I just found a dog gif.
Oh.
I don't know. It's so fucking millennial even to just bring it up. If you're a Zoomer and you don't like that, DM Shane.
I don't even know if I've said this on the show before. I don't think I have, but I don't think Doug would have ever been brought up. But apparently, I discovered later on, like as an adult, that because I liked that show as a kid as well. But
I loved it.
It was apparently like the creator of it was from Richmond, the same hometown as me, and it's actually Chesterfield County, and it's actually based on that, like down to some of the landmarks in the show are based on real places in the area. Like the mall is called the Four-Leaf Clover Mall, and like the real mall was the Cloverleaf Mall.
That's so interesting.
It's now been, became a dead mall and has been bulldozed for more suburban sprawl, and you know how it goes.
The most devastating thing that I learned was that Hey Arnold was not necessarily based in Brooklyn.
Oh, really?
I think the creator was just like it was an amalgamation of like Baltimore and Chicago and Brooklyn or something like that. It's like,
I remember the schools. I remember the schools in that show had the same like PS 109 or whatever. They had like the same New York City type thing. So I don't know if other places do. Other places do that? I thought that was just.
I don't
a New York
remember
thing.
that in Miami.
I'm just gonna say.
Like
I'm just gonna say confidently right now on the show without doing any research.
It's only New York.
Only New York does that. New York, baby.
Yeah, that wasn't the way in my hometown.
Greatest city in the world.
Langley High School.
Yeah.
Just School of the Americas is where I went to high school.
Hialeah, Miami Lakes High School. Yeah.
Langley High School. Hey, are you guys going to come to the party later? We're going to be waterboarding each other.
It's a hazing. It's an initiation hazing. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, I really wanted to go to Denise's party, but I couldn't because I had to stay home and analyze some intercepts. I'm just like writing a script. Mr. Movies, let's do this. Let's write the script for Langley High School.
Directed by Wes Anderson. Sorry.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off this death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have with us Chris.
Howdy.
And we've got Carrie.
Hello.
So this is man, did this snowball in a way that I did not expect it to this episode. Because I think I was like literally just like looking at, multinational conglomerates on my own time, as I do. And I was just like following this like thread. And I was just like, what is this fucking website of a company that like what they even explain that they do is so vague. I can't even quite understand what they're doing. I can understand it's some sort of consultancy. And it turned out, motherfucker, did we open up a Pandora's box? Because it is just fucking insane. The company that we're discussing is Kroll and Company. That's Kroll. And basically what they do, and I'm going to set it up in a second and explain kind of like their general business models and all that. But basically what they do is they're like as a self-described risk consulting firm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? What they're interested in is corporate risk. And you could put it under like the vague umbrella term of like management consulting. But, management consulting can mean like a gazillion things, right? Like, I mean, management consulting can be something like, hey, maybe you should stop making some of these less profitable widgets and just focus on the profitable widgets. And that's one aspect of management consulting. And then, as we've learned, in other aspects of it, it's like, McKinsey literally consulting the Sackler family on like $1 per dead body number that they should figure in their settlements with like the opioid crisis, right? So which is why you should be a little suspicious when a risk consultant or management consultant is vague on their thing, and fucking for good reason. So let me explain a little bit about the Kroll Incorporation, including the founder, Jules Kroll. I'm going to read in a few moments from a 2009 New Yorker profile on Jules Kroll. But let me just kind of give the rough background about the guy. He's not even a boomer. He's a silent generation guy from Bayside, Queens. He was born in 1941 in Bayside. See, Bayside is, we really got to look at what's happening. I mean, a total complete shutdown of Bayside, Queens until we figure out what the hell's going on. Because we've got Donald Trump, Andrew Cuomo, and at the end of this episode, you understand Jules Kroll is just one fucking very interesting gentleman, to say the least.
But by the way, let's go ahead and put it out there now. Jules Kroll is the father of comedian Nick Kroll.
Yes.
And not making this up. Yeah.
I was going to say, I was so surprised when you brought this up, Dwight, because it was just a few days before Shane had shown me Kroll Show for the first time and mentioned it to me, and I had looked it up and I was like, no fucking way. This is crazy.
Yes. let's just put out a straight spoiler alert for everybody. Anybody that you like or admire in Hollywood or music has rich parents.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. I was looking at something. It was I stumbled on. I'd gotten really into Tears for Fears lately. Jason Crane can attest to this because we've been DMing about Tears for Fears. But for whatever reason, I've been super into Tears for Fears. And I saw that this young woman, one young musical artist named Diva Smith, is the daughter and has these kind of shitty LA sounding kind of pop songs. And her dad is Kurt Smith of Tears for Fears. And I'm just there it is, man. I mean, you're just going to have fucking rich parents. Anderson Cooper's, his mom is Gloria Vanderbilt. Same thing. Nick Kroll, for millions of reasons, not to diminish his talent or whatever, but man, is it easier to come by, when you have all of your fucking...
Is he good or does he suck or what's... I've never even seen his shit.
I think Kroll Show is pretty funny. Some of it is...
He's funny.
Yeah, some of it is not aged well, but...
I don't trust him.
I liked him also on...
You shouldn't trust him.
I like The League a lot. I'm gonna just divulge that about myself. I don't like football, but for whatever reason, I really enjoyed The League, which is about a fantasy football league for those who don't know, including people recording this podcast right now, if they're not familiar. I saw no recognition in your face. Yeah.
That's well, it's funny. I was just I have a lot to learn. I was talking with Stephen Monicelli the other day, friend of the show, and he used a term that I just thought was so prescient. I'm like, I know I admire Steve a lot, but this is such a smart term. And then I regurgitated it to our producer, and he was just that's a sports term. And I was it was an unforced error. And I was just man, I'm a fucking idiot, dude.
No, you're very smart.
Anyway.
I think you're smart.
Oh yeah. Dwight outing himself as a moron. Anyway, so yes. Yeah. So Nick Kroll is one of, I think 4 or 5 kids that he has.
Yeah, several kids.
Yep.
So anyway, so Jules here is from Bayside, and I'm gonna get into it a little bit more. But his dad ran a printing business, which we're gonna talk about it shortly, which kind of shaped the his origin story. But he ended up going to Cornell, at which he was part of the Quill and Dagger. I'm just gonna say secret society.
Oh,
yeah, probably the CIA recruiting ground.
Is that like Skull and Bones?
Probably. That's what I'm assuming.
Exactly like Skull and Bones. Yeah, no, it's exactly like Skull. I mean, it sounds a little bit. I mean, I have a feeling that they don't have the equivalent of Geronimo's bones, or do all.
You don't know.
Maybe they do share a clavicle every year, but it's really weird. And I found this specific statistic, I guess, about the Quill and Dagger, which was from 1913 to 1984, Quill and Dagger had at least one member in the U.S. Congress every single year.
God damn, dude.
All right.
Fuck.
Isn't that intense? And then they go through this list of things, which I think is less flattering than they think it is. But I'm just reading from Wikipedia here, because whatever. It says, in recent decades, the society had a strong presence in the U.S. State Department and related government positions, with 2 national security advisors, 2 directors of policy planning, and numerous assistant secretary and senior advisors. 2 members recently served as World Bank presidents, and many members have served on the Council of Foreign Relations. Paul Wolfowitz, to name a few. It's just really weird. And I like this here. It says, during the 1930s and 50s, the chairman of Standard Oil, Sun Oil, now Sunoco, and Continental Oil, now ConocoPhillips, were Quill and Dagger members. And I'm just like, man, this just isn't as flattering as you think it is.
From 1945 through 1951, Quill and Dagger had at least one member working on Operation Paperclip every year.
That's right. So again, like, you know, I don't get the sense that he, he came from enormous kind of legacy privilege because his parents were, not like that. But he definitely, his father was a business owner. So he came from some means enough to be able to get to Cornell University as just a regular kid from Bayside. and he went to fucking Georgetown Law afterwards, interestingly enough, which led him to be on the RFK, the Robert F. Kennedy presidential campaign, and then worked in the assistant district attorney's office in Manhattan. Now, here's where I'm going to move over to, because I just find that not only is it important for us to like learn just the kind of raw facts, let's call them, about his origin story, but also understand how, a profile piece on a man of enormous wealth is talked about, right? Because he's a billionaire. He's worth $2 billion. So it's just funny that, when you kind of see the way that they frame these sorts of origin stories. So what happened basically with was that his dad got sick and he had this printing business. And he was like, hey, I got to step up and leave the Manhattan district attorney's office as an assistant district attorney to go and help out the family business. And this is what they set up as the origin story. So I'm going to read here from this 2009 New Yorker profile on him by William Finnegan. And it reads here, it was the 1950s, and what Kroll mainly remembers was watching his old man go over the books at the kitchen table on Sundays and the humiliations that his father suffered at the hands of purchasing agents, many of whom required gifts, kickbacks, before they would give him work. He said, it was pretty dispiriting, he says. It made me pretty angry. So it goes on to say that he was supposed to just do this 3-month stint at the when his dad got sick, but he ended up being there for 3 years. And it says here, but the experience gave Kroll an idea. He made the rounds of companies that had a lot of printing done. He could save them money, he said. He knew where the graft was in the printing jobs, the bribes and the waste and the overpayments. He wasn't asking them for a fee, just a percentage of whatever he saved them. The parent company, this is for Shane, the parent company of Marvel Comics was the first to agree.
Oh my God.
Kroll, and Kroll was soon saving the company so much that it tore up the percentage deal, which may have made Kroll rich and put him on retainer, rather.
Wow.
And he says here, I really owe my business to those superheroes, Spider-Man and the Hulk.
And this is such a horseshit origin story that he has constructed for himself to like feel better about himself, because like this is the way he likes to frame what he does, as like he's someone who like roots out corruption and stuff like that. And so of course he has to kind of like give this as the origin story into like how he kind of got into the business that he's in, which in reality that's not at all what he's in the business of doing.
Exactly. And so I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was written in 2009, and it was kind of like following him as he's back at Cornell University giving a speech to like students saying like, hey, be like me, you come from Bayside, and if anything, the world's your oyster. He doesn't quite sound like that, but yeah, not far. That's like that like nearly is almost like a Nick Kroll character.
Yeah.
Like, oh hey, I'm Nick Kroll.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. Anyway, but if I'm not mistaken too, and we'll get into this, I think this is like after he left Kroll and company in like 2008, and then he had like a 1 year kind of like non-compete. So I think this is like in that time that he's like doing that, right?
Oh, he's getting ready.
So he's getting ready. He's got a profile in the New Yorker. Now he's talking at Cornell. I don't want to spoil too much. We'll get to it, but so I'm going to keep reading here. It says, according to the history professor who introduced Kroll that day, Kroll Incorporated specializes in pursuing crime, particularly financial crime, across international borders. And it continues saying, and so Kroll told stories about recovering the wealth plundered by dictators, among them Ferdinand Marcos, Saddam Hussein, Jean-Claude Duvalier of Haiti. Baby Doc, this I guess the former president of Haiti, Kroll said, was not the sharpest nail in the box. He had looted the Haitian treasury by writing big checks. Apartment in Trump Tower? Kroll made a show of laborious penmanship. Trump Tower, like he's like writing out the corruption, basically, is what he's saying.
This guy's annoying.
Yeah, you're fucking sure he's annoying. And so I love this. So this is an interesting framing. It says the first question. This is again this Cornell speech. The first question from a Nigerian student was more in the nature of a plea. In my country, you cannot imagine the corruption, the young man said. It is everywhere you look, and you could be killed for saying anything. Please come to Nigeria. We need you.
Plant.
Yeah, absolute plant. Not even a question. Absolutely.
And this is Kroll responding. He said, we are there. We've been to Nigeria about 10 times in the past year or two. People exist there who want to turn things around. It's a very tough environment, but we are there. He asked the young man to write his contact information down. I'm pretty sure this kid got a job offer, which we're actually going to, we may or may not get to it, but apparently he was like, it's not uncommon that people went into Kroll's office and left with a job. I think he's like, hey, it's a big tent for fucking Pinkertons.
Interesting.
So this is an interesting framing here. It says a student from Germany asked Kroll if Kroll had the authority to conduct investigations. Wasn't that role reserved for police? And he said, no. Kroll needed a license to operate. That was all. Kroll then told a story about being an American telecommunications company that was being extorted by Turkish hackers in Germany. The FBI was not ready to get involved, so the company brought in Kroll. Kroll sent an operative into the hackers' midst, like a fucking mole, I guess, quickly gathering enough evidence to interest the FBI. That's how I make my living, Kroll said. The FBI is busy.
Wow. Major L for the FBI.
That's fucking insane. So it goes on to say that, like, but actually, you know, where he made his money wasn't like, you know, in these, in you know, comic books and shit like, you know, the Marvel comics, like he was saying earlier. Where he actually made his dough was the likes of Goldman Sachs and Scott and Arps and these like long lists of corporations, law firms,
Drexel,
investment
Burnham,
banks.
Lambert, the murderer's row of 80s shitheads. Yeah, financial institutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what he said, and I love this, I just have to read this here because I see it. It says, call it corporate intelligence. There were, of course, plenty of detective agencies and security companies around when he started, but successful private investigators in the United States, Pinkerton, Wachenhut, had tended to expand into guard and alarm operations. Kroll took his business in another direction, upward, into finance and strategic planning. He offered an ever-widening range of services, forensic accounting, crisis management, competitor analysis. I think that term is fucking broad and very liberally used. Tooled for a globalized business world in which industrial espionage, counterfeiting, computer fraud, identity fraud, and so sophisticated financial crimes have flourished. So basically, and I love this guy who's just a vice chairman of Kroll. His name is Joe Rossetti. He said he was legitimizing private detective work at a different level. And that's exactly what this is. This is literally PIs to do fucking opposition research on your competitors, find out, you know, the C-suite level executives of the person of the company you're trying to do a hostile takeover of, and find out who he's having an affair with, to blackmail. Like, that's the kind of shit that they're in the business of doing. Again, it's very sanitized and a very kind of like rosy picture of how they, you know, want to say what they actually do. But and he says it here. It says risk mitigation. Quote, risk mitigation is one of Kroll's preferred descriptions for his line of work. Like other catchphrases that he has employed through the years, professional services, management consulting, it helps rub off the patina of seediness attached to the term private investigator. It's really fucking insane to me that this is, so anyway, so he goes on to say how he had actually in 71 ran for city council as an anti-corruption candidate. Again, like this is so inconsequential that like it's obviously like, you know, manufactured by his publicist and PR team to like explain.
Well, he's also like he's a Democrat. He's like a staunch Democrat up to this day. So he has to like pay lip service to this type of stuff. I looked, by the way, at his political, and there's going to be a lot of like, you know, like fan favorites popping up in this episode. But I looked at his political contributions. In 2016, he was John Delaney all the way.
No fucking way.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. He gave 500 to Delaney in 2016 and like 2,000 in 2012. I didn't even know Delaney ran in 2012. But
oh my
like
god,
all of his political contributions were like to
Congress.
Delaney and remember Michael Bennett, like all the fucking like shithead corporate Democrats. Like that's his. That's his.
Oh, that's so
like
funny.
if he weren't towing the Democratic line, like he would donate to John Kasich.
Yes, exactly.
That's the kind of shit. He's like, well, I like their policy platform. Meanwhile, like nobody even fucking remembers who Michael Benn was. He like a senator from
Colorado,
Montana, or Colorado?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Chris remembers.
And now fucking Hickenlooper's there. God, fucking, I hate everybody. Anyway, so it's just funny here how they frame it too, where he it says, again. It says here, Jules was never interested in money, but the election defeat had shaken Kroll. He'd been right about the corruption in Queens, which literally we found out, to this day with AOC defeating the fucking, who's that, the big dude oh God, what's his name? Crowley. Joe Crowley. Again,
Crowley.
Like that's the Queen's party machine. So
that's just like a fucking political machine name, right? Crowley, come on.
Yeah, exactly. This guy may as well not exist, except just like fictionally. But it says here, the machine felt unbeatable though, and Kroll was in debt. He and Lynn had a new baby and were so broke that their car was repossessed. You know those broke business owners.
Yeah.
And
it's so hard.
It's just so funny here because it says like the first employees of J. Kroll Associates had printing backgrounds, but when Kroll saw that fraud investigations were becoming a source of profit, he started hiring ex-detectives. He soon went into other industries, trying to help a bank streamline its purchasing. He ended up in the warehousing business. Once you've been invited into someone's dining room to feed them, you want to have more than a salad to offer. What the fuck does that mean?
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
It's like just, well, he's really smart, so we just might not get it.
You have to have a very high IQ to understand Jules Kroll.
Well, what he's describing, and I guess he has sort of continued doing this. What he's describing is like sort of like branching out into multiple different industries. Like nowadays, since he's like left Kroll, he's like started like another business doing like bonds and securities ratings and stuff like that. So I guess he's like shifting his existing clientele to other things that they might need.
Yeah.
I love this line from him where he starts to talk about like the variety of people that he's hiring, like with ex-cops and shit like that. And he says, if you put a team that's all ex-detectives, you'll get the same answer every time. I like to mix it up. You need at least one woman on any team.
So generous. Such a generous concession of him. You gotta have at least one. It's funny that with that in mind, I got another thing here. This is from another article.
Nowadays, you gotta hire a broad.
Yeah. Well, no,
he's an ally.
And this is from another article that actually gives the breakdown of like the the women in his organization. It says at Kroll, the managing directors are almost all male. The highest ranking woman is the head of corporate communications and a managing director. Of the company's 40 investigators, 10 are women. This is from 1992. It's a much larger organization now. But yeah, very, very generous of him to,
maybe I'll apply for a job there.
At least one woman. Yeah. I mean, they may need, the other one woman may be leaving. You might be the perfect time to get her job. Yeah.
Yeah. You never know unless you try.
But this is like, and so this part is like where it seems like so image incoherent. Because he says here, like, just a few paragraphs ago, they were saying about how he was broke and got his fucking car towed or whatever. But it says here, he lovingly buffed his company's image. It says, Jules used to joke that the third person he'd hired was his driver. He carried himself like a captain of $1 billion corporation when we were simply a $5 million corporation. Jules never walked in the service entrance of any building, figuratively speaking. He considered himself equal to that of any merchant banker, any law firm partner. Fucking insane. So as you had said here earlier, Chris, this is where Drexel Burnham Lambert comes in, the investment bank. It says in 1982, Drexel Burnham Lambert, the investment bank, agreed to underwrite a $25 million public offering for a Minnesota charter flight company that, as it turns out, flew almost no charter flights, which is fucking like fraud, right? Fred Joseph.
Good thing that was
Drexel's
the only fraud Drexel Burnham Lambert was doing at this time. Yeah,
that's right. Fred Joseph, the chief executive, was mortified. He asked a partner at Scott and Arps, which is an enormous law firm, to recommend an investigator who could dig up all potential problems with potential counterparties. The Scotland investigators sent over a list of names that included, I have no idea what they mean by this, but included Dick Tracy, Charlie Chan, Sherlock Holmes, and Jules Kroll.
The best detectives in the world, baby.
Fucking insane. Yeah. So again, and he was called in to do these kind of like, research on people, like whether or not they're legit, basically. Again, this is like the fucking risk management.
What's funny when they mention this in this article, what they don't mention is that Drexel Burnham Lambert, this is where Michael Milken was working during this time period, and he was selling the fucking junk bonds that ended up, turning into the savings and loans scandal. But like, not only like, there's a couple other articles, like Drexel Burnham Lambert keeps coming up in like Kroll's work in the 80s. So like, not only was he working for Drexel doing this type of stuff, he was also helping, like once the savings and loans crisis like came to a head or whatever, he was also like, even though he'd spent the past few years like consulting for Drexel, he then like consulted for the FDIC in their like investigation of Drexel. And then also during that same time when he was like helping, I guess, the FDIC investigate Drexel, he was also still helping Drexel investigate and like try to discredit Ivan Boesky, who was just like another fucking, shithead during that same era. So this is a thing that's going to come up like time and time again. He's got his fingers, he's got his dirty little fingers in everything. And like every side of everything here.
Exactly. So where the company made like a huge, boost in their scope of business and their profits was the passing of the 1977 Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which required American companies doing business overseas to stop bribing foreign officials. And so that, as it says here, generated a lot of auditing, which, by the way, they just do now through like third parties or whatever that aren't subject to fucking, the American laws. But as a result, it got a lot of auditing and compliance business thrown their way. It says here, the company opened offices in Paris, Moscow, Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Singapore, and Manila, and it began to provide clients with assessments of political and criminal risk, executive protection, aka bodyguarding, and, quote, K&R, kidnapping prevention and ransom negotiations. Fucking, and this is, I hate this so much. It says overseas operations eventually accounted for a major part of Kroll's business. I asked Helsby, which is somebody else, in the article that worked for Kroll, I asked Helsby if Kroll had stringers in every country on Earth, and he said, "We don't currently have a guy in Antarctica, but if you know anybody good, let me know." Fuck you. So they go on to just like give some explanations. They talk about a particular Italian banker, which Chris, I believe you'll talk about later.
Oh yes.
They give a explanation of this Turkish family that was supposed to build a mobile phone network for Nokia and Motorola that ended up, just embezzling it basically, and he tracks them down. And so it goes on to say, like, this is the kind of things that we do. He says here that they're not, what they don't do is illegal means.
Of course.
So like, we don't intercept, communications or whatever, even though later on they do say that. But it says here, I'll explain in a second. He has hired plenty of graduates from the CIA and other secret services, such as MI6 and the Mossad, and has also been obliged.
Nothing ominous there. Yeah.
No, it's fine. That's fine. And has been obliged to fire some for breaking the rules with the end of the Cold War. And see, it just seems like everything went well for this guy because, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And then it says here, within the end of the Cold War, a flood of former spies came onto the private security market. Their methods and networks could be useful, particularly in countries with the ex-Soviet states newly opened to foreign investment. Got it? Now we've liberalized, we've gotten rid of these dirty Soviets, these dirty communists, and now fucking, the Ford Motor Company and Coca-Cola can come in and sell
he's the one he did consulting for Pizza Hut and like set up that commercial with Gorbachev.
Oh God. I hate it so much. I love this, though. He says, Kroll has hired two former New York City police commissioners, Robert McGuire in 89 and Bill Bratton in 2000. Fucking Bill Bratton. And they got the major contract to redesign the security system of the World Trade Center after the 93 terrorist bombing.
And nothing bad ever happened there again.
No.
They nailed it.
They really nailed it, yeah.
Yeah, there was that security system was never replaced. Sorry.
Oh, no. Fuck.
I'm just angry. I'm angry
We're so
today,
close
man.
to
This
the anniversary. The disrespect, Dwight.
The disrespect.
I know.
Dude. It's like you
I
forgot.
didn't forget though. Not me. Wouldn't be me. So this is interesting here, and again, the fact that this came out in 2009, and you'll understand why that bugs me so much. It said here, Jules Kroll never liked living from case to case. Just waiting for jobs to come in over the transom was too chancy. He had endless ideas for new lines of business, but rarely the revenue to implement them. In 1991, Hank Greenberg, the chief of AIG, one of the world's largest insurance companies, convinced Kroll that they were in the same business, risk. Again, this article was being written in 2009. And if anybody has any competency about how the fuck the 2008 financial crisis came down, understand that it came down directly because of malfeasance on AIG's behalf. Because AIG said, we're going to insure banks to sell these, mortgage-backed securities with, the bad subprime loans in them. And AIG said, AIG was asked, well, who's guaranteeing them? And then AIG said, well, just we will. And then, they became insolvent and they were the too big to fail company. And this is being written about fawningly over AIG. And this is written about a fucking year after, this is as the entire American workforce is shaking in their boots and unemployment is skyrocketing. It's just fucking pathological to me. But anyway, what he's saying is he sold 22% of the company to AIG, and that gave him the capital he needed. So basically what he's saying here is two things. The first thing, just the obvious thing, is he wanted cash to be able to do things. He needed some capital, some financial backing, right? So he sold some of his private company to AIG. And the thing that I'm reading into it is when he says we're in the same business, risk, he's also opening his firm up to a cornucopia of business, right? Because if AIG is looking to underwrite something or insure something and they're not sure about it, well, who are they going to hire to go take a look at it? Kroll. And what they ended up doing was they merged with an Ohio armored car company. Anyway, it's fucking weird. And so they continue here saying oh Jesus, this is just so there's so much to it. I don't want to get into it too much, but I just have to read this one thing. It says Kroll has suffered its share of embarrassments. Its agents have admitted to dumpster diving through shredded documents once they're on public property.
Hey, they wouldn't dare break the law. Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. See, exactly.
They can't do it on private. They can't do it on their property. Yeah.
No. Wouldn't want to. That happened in a fight between the cosmetic giants Avon and Mary Kay. But there are allegations that the firm has gone lower still. According to James B. Stewart's book, quote, Den of Thieves, Martin Siegel, who in 1987 had pleaded guilty to insider trading while at Kidder Peabody. I don't know. I think they're missing something here. While at Kidder Peabody, was harassed by Kroll operatives seeking to intimidate him so he wouldn't testify against an arbitrageur at Goldman Sachs. Yikes. It's just fucking brown shirts. It says the Kroll employees impersonated a New York City police officer and a journalist, scared off a potential donor to his child's camp that Siegel was setting up, and paid his 16-year-old babysitter $50 for some damning information about him. Insane. I like this. It says the company's worst black eye, according to Kroll. Again, this is in the framing that Kroll is willing to admit for this, think piece about him. Came in Brazil in 2004 when the federal police raided the firm's Sao Paulo offices and arrested 5 employees. Kroll had been hired by Brazil Telecom to investigate whether the company's second largest shareholder, Telecom Italia, was laying groundwork for a takeover. The government accused Kroll of wiretapping, bribing officials, and illegally intercepting emails.
And this
and that's the worst intercept that came out of Brazil. don't include that.
It's really good though.
But this is Kroll's bread and butter though, and this is what like this article actually doesn't get into so much is like his main thing. What really kind of blew him up in the 80s was getting involved with firms who were either the target of a hostile takeover or like the person who or consulting for the person who was trying to take over the firm hostily. Like in particular, Victor Posner was one of the ones that he was consulted about frequently. T. Boone Pickens, I read some article, I think it was this one by the Los Angeles Times called Wall Street's Super Sleuth from 1988 that talks about his dealings with T. Boone Pickens, who was a pretty well-known corporate raider of the 80s who was like going around doing hostile takeovers of companies. And reading from I actually just found it here. Reading from this article here, it says corporate raider T. Boone Pickens complains that Kroll keeps a 2-foot thick file on him that he sells for $500,000 to any company that Pickens goes after. A few years ago, he got a short-lived court order stopping Kroll investigators from poking around his hometown, Amarillo, Texas.
Jesus Christ, man. They don't stop.
Right, and so and this is like, and this is I think a point we'll come back to much time and time again throughout this is that as much as he and this New Yorker piece sort of like plays into his own description of himself as like someone who like you got to root out corruption and the police are too busy. You call in Kroll and we're gonna come in and help you and we're gonna do all this sort of stuff. But like what his job really is to dig up dirt, and it doesn't matter if he's doing it to root out corruption or doing it for any kind of justice. It's whoever is willing to pay him. He's gonna. And this is what he did. This is how he made his millions throughout the 80s. Was selling his services to whichever fucking bank was doing any kind of fraud or trying to stop a hostile takeover, or he's basically going from one fucking firm that no longer exists because the CEOs are in prison, like in federal prison now. Like it's just him going from, it's like a laundry list, one after the other, Michael Milken and Victor Boski and all these various people from the 80s, and he's just like whichever one is going to pay top dollar for his services, which is to fucking dig up dirt and intimidate people and strong arm people and do like like intelligence agency type shit. He's like selling the services. I mean, like they brag about it, right? I mean, his firm is full of people for like ex-CIA, ex-Mossad, like what do you think their skill set is, right? He's essentially selling the the same kind of services that the CIA and Mossad do to whatever private company can pay for it. And
they mention this in the New Yorker article, this phrase, which I think is entirely apt, which can summarize this entirely, which is the private CIA. Yeah. It's a CIA that you can hire. I don't know if it was him or someone else high up in his organization. It might have been in that New Yorker article, but they say like there's a line that I remember that was like our most successful operations you're never going to hear about. Nobody's ever going to hear about those. So fucking terrifying. I just want to highlight before I turn it over to you, Chris. I want to just highlight a few other things that they were involved in. One most notably was at the collapse of the Soviet Union. The risk basically was for the kind of party bosses to say like, hey, this is going down. Let's fucking take some of these rubles and put them in fucking Swiss bank accounts and shit like that. And there was this kind of a quick looting and cash grab that could have happened. And I just want to read here just to explain it for 2 seconds from this 1992 New York Times article called U.S. Company to Help Russia Track Billions. And it says here, the Russian government has hired a New York investigative company to help it track down and reclaim billions of dollars thought to have been siphoned out of the country by corrupt government and Communist Party officials in recent years. In an interview on Russian television on Sunday night, First Deputy Prime Minister Igor Gaidar said that the government was prepared to now begin a, quote, vigorous search for state-owned capital that flowed abroad virtually unchecked ever since the Soviet Union's communist bosses understood that their power and the old system were coming to an end. The government has retained Kroll Associates, a 19-year-old concern known internationally for its successful pursuit of assets hidden by President Ferdinand Marcos, former President Jean-Claude Duvalier of Haiti, and the government of President Saddam Hussein in Iraq, which basically, and I'll just read from a separate thing quickly here. What they did was, it says the Kuwaiti government hired Kroll from 90 to 91 to investigate the financial network used by Iraq dictator Saddam Hussein to hide assets in the West. Kroll's work linked Hussein's to millions in assets held through nominees in the U.S. and Europe, exposing his front companies and agents.
This is the thing he's most proud of. Like when someone asks him about what his company does, like there's he did an interview with Charlie Rose about 10 or 12 years ago or so, and this is mostly what he talks about. This is like his finest moment, because again, this is like he gets to he helped track down the millions that this whatever brutal dictator or whatever pillaged from the coffers of the people of Iraq and Kuwait or whatever. It's like this is the type of stuff he likes to talk about when asked about his work.
Exactly. And just before I relinquish it to you, Chris, I just want to mention one report that I stumbled upon, which is from Austin, Texas. And this is from austintexas.gov, where I'm just going to read here. It says Kroll Associates Incorporated releases its initial report on the Austin Police Department Training Academy. And I'm just going to read just a few of the bullet points here. It says, in November 2020, as directed by Council Resolution, blah, 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 the Office of Police Oversight, in consultation with the city manager, retained Kroll Associates to review and evaluate the Austin Police Department on the extent to which racism and discrimination are present in the protocols, practices, and behaviors of the department.
What'd they find out?
It says here, among the findings of its initial evaluation are the need for the APD to A, increase racial, gender, and ethnic diversity among the ranks of academy instructors.
Okay, so they need one woman.
Sure.
Which is like...
Yeah.
Yes. To B, balance the need for paramilitary training models.
What?
With best practice. I shit you not, dude.
Boy.
I shit you not.
I'm clipping. Holy shit. I got to turn my...
with best practices of adult learning theories into curriculum and teaching methods, and replace collective discipline techniques with team building exercises. C, search for appropriate replacement training videos that more effectively depict best practices, which is just like to say, like, yeah, their training videos suck.
Right.
And D, build a long-term system of internal and external review of training methods and academy effectiveness. I honestly feel like they were searching for something. They're like, fuck, we got paid, $500,000 for this engagement with them.
Right.
Like, we need to come up with something. And they're like, hey, your training videos aren't so good.
Right.
Like, how it's like so clear how bullshit this would, like an idiot could see this and be like, oh, this man, they didn't get their money's worth for this. But again, like, if Kroll's business model is to like threaten and intimidate, like, what the fuck? Entrap. What the hell are they going to, how the hell are they going to reform a police department?
How are they going to help the police, whose main business anyway is strong arming and entrapping people? Yeah,
especially when a lot of their employees are former law enforcement. Like, what new insight are they going to have?
Yeah. Well, that's why you got to have one woman. That's what he said. If you got a bunch of retired detectives, they're all going to have the same answer. That's why you got to have one woman.
The one woman wrote that report.
Yeah.
I can't get over this. When I read this sentence, for whatever reason, my eyes just like trained on it. It said, balance the need for paramilitary training models with best practices. Just fucking insane. Yeah. It's a police department of a city.
Yeah.
Like, they should be getting cats out of trees and like helping people to lock their keys in their car and shit.
Yeah.
And instead it's fucking paramilitary. It's insane. Anyway, so that's the intro.
Yeah.
That's the intro of Kroll Associates. Chris, let me turn it over to you to see how what happened.
Yeah, by all means. So throughout the 90s, like you said, he's doing his tracking down Saddam Hussein's money. He helped I guess track down money misappropriated by the Duvaliers in Haiti. And then 9/11 happened, and it ends up being a big boon for him because I guess he did such a good job putting in the security systems at the World Trade Center that he that became one his bread and butter in the early 2000s was like security consulting for big corporations. And so from 2001 to 2002 they make this huge amount of money doing this type of thing. And then so by 2004 I think mostly kind of content with the direction Kroll and company is going, he decides that he's going to, step aside and do his own thing. And so in 2004, he decides he's going to sell the company, and he's in negotiations with Marsh and McClellan, this insurance broker, who are, in negotiations to buy it. And actually, at this same time that these negotiations are going on, Marsh and McClellan is under investigation by then New York Attorney General Elliot Spitzer. And there's again, like I said, there's several months of negotiations about the price of the deal, and specifically if it's going to include any Marsh and McClellan stock as part of the deal. And then they finally settle on this all cash agreement of $1.9 billion. And that's the price, and that's what they sell it for, $1.9 billion cash.
Jesus Christ.
And then right after that, Elliot Spitzer charges Marsh and McClellan with, indicts them for price fixing and collusion, and their stock collapses. And, so very lucky timing that he got that all cash deal right before their right before their stock collapsed.
Uncanny.
Really just keen business instincts there. But it's as part of the agreement, Kroll agrees to stay on board at the company through 2008, which like you said, he stays on through 2008, then he steps down, then he's got that 1 year, he's got a 1 year non-compete clause with Kroll, with the company Kroll, which that's when that New Yorker piece was published during that time. But luckily, he stays on just long enough to end up meaning that he oversees perhaps the company's biggest scandal coming to light, and that's what I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on here. And it's all about this guy named Alan Stanford, who I honestly didn't know anything about prior to this, but who we should really consider doing a full episode on. And this guy was basically operating just this incredibly brazen and obvious Ponzi scheme out of the Caribbean island of Antigua that ended up taking in $8 billion from investors. And it came to light. It's interesting because it came to light at right around the same time as Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme did, and it's actually second only to Madoff's in terms of scale.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it was really very much overshadowed by Madoff's. You didn't really hear anything about this one. And I think a big maybe part of that is that he was mostly not targeting American investors. He was targeting specifically investors based out of Latin America. That's who he was bilking out of their money. So I think that maybe that was part of the why there was not quite so much of a backlash to that as there was to Madoff. But this guy, Alan Stanford, most of this information, by the way, comes from this Vanity Fair article from 2009 called Pirate of the Caribbean. But this guy, Alan Stanford, is this failed businessman from Texas. He's just a fucking the Simpsons Texas oil tycoon character type guy. He's this big fucking 6'4" burly guy with a mustache. And he moves down to the Caribbean in the 80s and founds this Stanford Financial, this institute, this bank, this shell bank, basically, after bankrupting his first business, which was a chain of upscale health clubs based out of Waco. And like every description of this guy, from like every former associate and business partner, like going back decades, is like when he says like what a sleazy, scummy, like openly corrupt guy he is. And there's questions about like, you know, Stanford Financial's credibility and like where the money is coming from and all that sort of stuff, like going all the way back to when he opened his first bank. So like he files Chapter 11 bankruptcy for his gyms and his health clubs and stuff in 1982. And then like 2 years later in 1984, he goes personally bankrupt, listing $13.6 million in debt against $200,000 in assets. He spends the rest of that year working in the kitchen of a burger restaurant that his family owned, which then also goes out of business. so I mean, not
if it stinks like shit everywhere you go, you might need to check underneath your own shoe.
But then, like immediately after tanking two businesses, he leaves he leaves Waco and like all of his creditors behind, and goes to like he resettles in Houston. And then by the next year in 1985, he's opened his first branch of his bank, Stanford Financial, on the Caribbean island of Montserrat. And for $6 million, apparently, I guess was what he says was the cost for, I guess, the licensing and the bank and all that sort of stuff. And now the question of where that money came from, even from the start, is like he's offered this like series of flimsy explanations over the years about where the money came from. He said that it came from real estate investing that he did with his father in Houston, although there's no evidence of that. And in fact, like all the evidence says that they actually didn't start investing in real estate until after he'd already opened that bank. In 1999, during an interview, he said that the money came from a group of Aruban oil refinery workers. Yeah, no questions, no questions about any of that there. So yeah,
sounds legit.
It's very obvious from the beginning that he's operating this like offshore bank to commit some kind of financial crime or fraud or something like that. Just to kind of put it in perspective, in 1985, the island of Montserrat had 12,000 citizens and 350 offshore banks operating there. Most of them only existing on paper, like not even having any kind of actual location or anything like that. At least 200 of them, of those 350 banks, received their banking licenses from this guy, Jerome Schneider, who is like the offshore banking king, who was in 2002 indicted himself for conspiracy to defraud the IRS, wire fraud, and mail fraud. And so this guy, Alan Stanford, he opens his first bank, and he's like, constructs this whole mythos about it to give the bank credibility. Like he would tell customers that his grandfather founded the company in 1932, and he actually hung a picture, like this old timey picture or whatever of his grandfather, like this in the lobby, to like give this credibility. And like I said earlier, he would mostly target investors out of Latin America. He would run these newspaper ads to attract depositors, like promising these ludicrously high rates of return. And this takes off rather quickly. By 1989, he's got $55.5 million in accounts. By the next year, that nearly doubles to $100 million.
Jesus.
Wow.
And reading directly from this Vanity Fair piece here, it says, "Then came the trouble. According to David Marchant, it all began when an American computer programmer hired to update another Montserrat bank's systems complained to local authorities that his boss appeared to be transferring deposits into his personal bank account. A Scotland Yard man named Dick Marston was summoned to investigate. Marston brought in the FBI. A probe Marston expected to take a few weeks turned into a massive investigation that lasted years. By 1989, more than 100 banks were under scrutiny by British and American agents for every conceivable financial crime. Stanford's operation, by then one of the larger Montserrat banks, quickly became a target. Where, Marston wondered, were all these deposits coming from? Colombian drug money was flooding into banks across the region, and there were persistent rumors that this was the source of Stanford's growth. Marston called in an expert from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. As a one-time FBI agent involved in the Montserrat probe recalls, the OCC guy went down there, stood across from the Stanford office for maybe several hours, came back and said, "Yep, that's a money laundering operation." Marston goes,
Wow.
"How can you tell just from standing across the street?" And the guy goes, "I'm telling you it is." Then a little later, we got fairly detailed intelligence that they were indeed laundering for major Colombian drug traffickers. I remember very clearly that when the governor of Montserrat heard this, we had to literally peel the guy off the ceiling. The Montserrat authorities were already tossing dozens of shady banks out of the colony when the government revoked Stanford's license in May 1991. And so, this is in 1991. He gets his bank shut down on the island of Montserrat, and he closes that down. And he just picks up and moves his operations to Antigua, which is another Caribbean island. Mm-hmm. And reading a little bit more from this same article about what happens next in the various law enforcement agencies and government agencies that are becoming privy to what's going on here. It says, quote, "From the outset, U.S. authorities kept tags on Stanford. The Internal Revenue Service sued Stanford and his wife for failing to file their 1990 return and sought more than $420,000 in back taxes. 19 years later, the IRS is claiming that they owe over $226 million for returns from 1999 to 2003. Ouch. After the money laundering allegations on Montserrat, the FBI too has kept a keen eye on Stanford, more or less nonstop for more than 20 years. In terms of his notoriety, once that kind of information started coming in, he was known to a lot of folks in law enforcement, says a former FBI agent who investigated Stanford. He stayed very prominently on the radar for years, still is. There was a series of investigations. Obviously, none of them ever ended in indictments, but we're talking various FBI field divisions with multiple agents, multiple agencies over 10 to 12 years. Throughout Stanford's first decade on Antigua, the focus of U.S. investigators remained largely, perhaps exclusively, money laundering. Questions of whether the bank was swindling investors wouldn't arise for years. Quote, "If you were in the metaphoric bushes outside Stanford any time in the last 20 years, notes one U.S. security consultant, you would literally have been bumping into team after team of U.S. government agencies shouting at each other to get out of the way. You know, be quiet, Stanford will hear you. Those agencies would include the FBI, U.S. Customs, the Securities Exchange Commission. From everything I hear, there was endless interagency conflict over what to do and how serious this guy was. And all through...
See, this is why the government shouldn't interfere with business.
Yeah, exactly. But like all through this time, like he's also cozying up to the Bird government in Antigua, which is Antigua and Barbuda, which is also sort of like notoriously corrupt at the same time, and is also like itself, pillaging the public coffers and enriching itself and all that sort of stuff. And they knight him. He for a period of time, he was, before they revoked it, he was Sir Alan Stanford of Antigua.
No way.
So and over the years, he's also like I said, he was targeting mostly countries in Latin America. He's burning through countries, right? He started off early on targeting Brazil and Venezuela, and then gets all the business he can out of there, and starts burning bridges, and then there's only so many investors he can get before questions start being asked and that sort of stuff, and then he'll just completely cease operations there, and then move to Peru and do it again, and then move to Ecuador and do it again, and then move to Panama, and then he gets really brazen and starts courting American investors. And then also Mexican investors as well. So I'm saying all of this, and I know this is a lot of backstory and detail about someone who's not the focus of this episode, but I'm saying all of this to say that this guy is obviously operating a Ponzi scheme, is obviously nakedly corrupt to anybody who can look for half a second at his affairs is able to see this. And so with that being said, in 2007, this company out of Bethesda, Maryland, called Electri International is considering investing in Stanford's certificates of deposit. And in order to do their due diligence, check this guy out and make sure he's legit. Who do they hire? They hired Jules Kroll.
Yes.
So they pay Kroll $15,000, and Kroll and Company does their thing. The best PIs in the world. That's what they're paying for. They're former CIA agents and police detectives and Mossad psychos and all that shit. So Kroll gives this job to this guy named Thomas Cash, who is a former DEA agent that Kroll keeps on his payroll. And he gives him this job, and Cash, looks into Stanford Financial, and they write up their report, and then they come back to Electri International, and they say, well, everything looks good. Everything looks above board and legitimate, and this Alan Stanford guy can be trusted. This is a sound investment, blah, 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 blah. So this company, Electri International, ends up investing a total of $6.3 million in Stanford Financial, and not only do they not see a return, they actually lose all of it because Stanford gets arrested the next year. You may be thinking like, wow, this is really fucking shoddy work for the world's most preeminent detective agency.
The one woman must have done it.
Exactly. Especially considering, one of the things that Kroll likes to brag about is their ability to, trace clandestine movements of money around the world. They've done work with bank havens in Luxembourg and the Bahamas and Grand Cayman Island and all this sort of stuff. So they've done a lot of this type of work. But how did they miss all this shit? How is this possible? And the reality of it is that what Kroll did not disclose to Electri International before taking the job or at any point was that this guy Tom Cash, the DEA guy that was on his payroll, who took the job of investigating Stanford or whatever, was actually simultaneously a paid consultant at Stanford Financial.
That doesn't seem right to me. There,
not only Cash, Kroll himself had been doing work for Stanford going back at least a decade. And he'd basically been on retainer for this guy, Alan Stanford, the entire time. And I'm going to read a little bit from this, more from this Vanity Fair article here that describes this. It says, behind the scenes, Stanford was even more aggressive. As the company grew, he became renowned within law enforcement circles for aggressive counterintelligence. Stanford's security chief was a former head of the FBI's Miami office. But his greatest asset may have been a top security firm, Kroll Associates, whose Miami office worked with Stanford for years. Quote, Stanford was spending millions of dollars a year trying to figure out who was looking at him and aggressively combating whoever it was, recalls the former FBI agent. Kroll was essentially running a propaganda campaign in defense of Stanford's good name. They beat on me many times. Quote, hey, you got all this wrong. He's not a money launderer. He's a great guy. Leave him alone.
I love it.
Kroll's role in defending Stanford's reputation in both law enforcement circles and the wider banking community was an example of a controversial practice known within the private security world as, quote, reputational self-due diligence. That is, vouching for a client's good name. It is, by all accounts, an exceedingly lucrative business. Quote, what Kroll would do, says a former Kroll executive, was put together a very detailed description of the bank, what it does, look over its balance sheet, the origin of the deposits, and produce this really thick report that says this bank complies with the U.S. guidelines for combating money laundering, and you, Bank A, should feel free to work with them. It is controversial even within the firm. Kroll is considered, how to say this nicely, well, they're willing to take more controversial clients for this type of service. Kroll can confirm that this is the statement from Kroll that they gave to Vanity Fair. Kroll can confirm that it has provided routine professional services to various businesses related to Alan Stanford. All such work was provided consistent with Kroll's reputation, internal controls, and its history of working with law enforcement. Suggestions to the contrary are incorrect. Confidentiality restrictions prevent any further comment on these assignments. So, I mean, it's interesting that they would say all that they would like try to defend the work that they did when, some of the red flags that they missed was that they failed to disclose to this company. And this actually wasn't the only company. There's at least one other one that came to Kroll with the same situation, to asking like, we want to invest with this Alan Stanford guy. We want you to check him out. And they did the same exact thing where they came back and said, hey, it's all good. Give him your money. And
insane.
That's really both of those firms ended up suing Kroll. The Electri International, by the way, went on to sue him for $6.7 million. the $6.7 million that was lost, which was settled out of court for a undisclosed amount. But one of the things that they didn't disclose was that there was a 2006 lawsuit from a former Stanford employee alleging that it was a Ponzi scheme. They'd already had a $20,000 penalty levied against them by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. Not to mention, like it said, fucking 15, 20 years of investigation by the FBI and like all these other, law enforcement and government agencies. The people that, like, this is the fucking brain trust that Kroll is pulling his people from, right? Like, it's obviously he knew about all this, was in on it, and was willing to,
of course.
just take fucking whatever money to whatever money he can get. And the point here, and I hope it's obvious, is that, like, for all of, like, the same thing I said earlier, and for all of Kroll's all these bullshit, like, self-serving stories he has about the work he does, about how he's, like, sniffing out corruption or whatever, like, his services are for sale to the highest bidder. And as the self-described private CIA, he operates very much like the real CIA, which, also likes to put this veneer of justice on whatever they're doing. But at the end of the day, they exist to do the dirty work that will further the interests of American capital. And that's like the same thing that Kroll does, to whoever is willing to pay for it, American or not. And, Kroll is the guy that you call if... I guess if the CIA is not going to do it, like if your dad wasn't in Skull and Bones and, like, you don't know a CIA guy or whatever, you call Kroll, and he'll do the same kind of dirty work that they do, for a price. Except kill people, I guess. I don't know. He might. I really don't know.
Who knows?
We don't know.
Can't say it.
Okay, that would let's
Can't
speculative and allegedly, etc., etc.
We don't know that they don't do it.
We can't prove that they don't. That's very true.
So, it's on them to prove it.
Yeah, speaking of intelligence agencies and killing people, a couple more interesting threads that I wanted to kind of pull at here. This is from an article. I think I mentioned this earlier. No, I don't think I have yet. This is an article from the New York Times in 1992 called International Gumshoe. And I'm reading from this directly. When Kroll is not actively investigating an international cast of scoundrels, he has occasionally been hired by them. 2 weeks before his mysterious death, the publishing tycoon, Robert Maxwell, yes, it's that Robert Maxwell, the same Robert Maxwell, and publishing tycoon.
Which Robert Maxwell there, Chris? Do they have any kin that's of note for us?
I don't think so. I'm not entirely sure. It is funny. Yeah, of course. This is obviously Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and it's funny that his title, the title they choose for him is publishing tycoon, which I suppose is accurate, but it's not telling the full story there. But reading from here again, it says 2 weeks before his mysterious death, and Robert Maxwell obviously had his own intelligence ties, was like perhaps a former Mossad guy himself, or at least associated with them. But 2 weeks before his death, he summons Kroll to his penthouse suite in the Helmsley Palace in Manhattan, and asked him to investigate the, quote, dark forces he said were mobilizing against him. Dark forces that had nothing to do with the publisher's increasingly suspicious creditors. At the time of his death, Maxwell was working on a list of possible adversaries, a list that apparently has disappeared. With the Maxwell family crying poverty, Kroll Associates is no longer on the case. It's a shame that the Maxwell family never had any other sources of money that they're... Yeah,
no.
Weird. I guess we shouldn't...
I hate to break it to Bob, but I think the dark forces are coming from inside the house.
Yeah. I guess we shouldn't think all too much about that one. The other thing I wanted to mention that I found very interesting that like really blew me away, and you mentioned it earlier. It was in the New Yorker article you were talking about. I'm going to read from this a little bit. It says, Kroll sometimes trumps the local police. This happened in London after an Italian banker named Roberto Calvi was found hanged under Blackfriars Bridge in 1982.
Oh, shit.
Ooh.
The death was initially ruled a suicide, but Calvi's family was not satisfied. Calvi, who is known as God's banker because of his close ties to the Vatican, had many powerful enemies, not least the Italian mafia. The suicide ruling was later set aside. In 1991, the Calvi family hired Kroll. Among other things, the firm's investigators reassembled the scaffolding from which Calvi's body had been suspended, had a man the same size and weight, dressed in an identical suit and loafers, climb by the only possible route, and then examined his shoes under a microscope. They had traces of paint and rust from the scaffolding on the soles. The ones Calvi was wearing did not. Kroll concluded that Calvi had been murdered. Kroll's report elicited headlines in the British tabloids. The City of London police initially dismissed the report as amateurish, but Calvi's death was ultimately reclassified as a homicide. In 2005, 5 people, several with ties to the mafia, were charged in Rome with the killing. In 2007, they were acquitted. And what this... And what this article doesn't even mention, they mentioned the mafia link, but I think even more interesting is that Roberto Calvi was linked not just to the mafia, but also to Propaganda Due, also known as the P2 Masonic Lodge, which was essentially this like deep state secret society in Italy in the 70s and 80s, like very like hard right wing, anti-communist, like filled with like, you know, military leaders and the titans of industry and high-ranking government officials, including future Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi was a member of it, and they're linked to many political assassinations and criminal enterprises, and basically running this sort of unaccountable intelligence agency and sort of shadow government within Italy. So Google Propaganda Due, just a lot, and it's again, and like this is always, it's just the same names that come up over and over again. It's so strange and so bizarre. Just what a weird connection that the the family of this guy Roberto Calvi, who was murdered by one sort of like unaccountable shadowy intelligence agency. They end up hiring Kroll to investigate it, and it's weird. And the Maxwell connection, it's weird stuff. It's a small club. Every one of these fucking cretins is no more than 2 steps away from Jeffrey Epstein, like as a rule. And it's very, I was very surprised, I guess not surprised, but it was very interesting to see these same little threads and names pop up in this story here.
Fucking uncanny,
so,
man.
One last thing of note, before we turn it over to you, Carrie, to talk about Kroll's, what he's been up to since he left his Kroll Incorporated, his last company. But Kroll is, with him no longer at the helm, they're still doing their thing. And I was checking out their website, and one of the things that I just wanted to read this because I found it interesting. But one of the things that they're doing now, if you check out the services on their websites, one of the things they're doing is social media risk assessments.
Yes, dude.
And I'm reading directly from their webpage here. It says, helping clients assess and contextualize risks presented by social media influencers. The rise of social media has provided a powerful new channel for organizations to expand their reach by tapping into the networks of people with large online followings. But working with a social media influencer is a double-edged sword. While your organization may benefit from the influencer's network, you will also be associated with anything the influencer does or has done online, which can result in reputational, regulatory, and legal consequences. Furthermore, the ability of influencers to monetize their followings has led to an underground market of fake followers that can deceptively inflate an influencer's market value.
Fake friends.
I was just thinking the same thing, man. Yes. Kroll is investigating fake friends. Kroll helps organizations control the risks presented by social media influencers through comprehensive due diligence and ongoing monitoring. We begin by applying a sophisticated portfolio of tools to identify and analyze an influencer's complete online presence across text and video-based platforms in multiple regions and languages. Our advanced technologies allow us to build a comprehensive digital dossier of the influencer more quickly and cost-effectively than in-house resources. Kroll's experts in risk-based analysis then contextualize the material we have gathered to filter out false alarms and flag items that present a meaningful level of risk to the organization's brand. While analysis of an influencer's content is at the center of our profiling, we go further and conduct a holistic appraisal of their complete online presence, including their interests, personal affiliations, legal and regulatory issues, and negative media coverage to create a complete picture of their reputational standing. In addition to examining an influencer's digital profile, we also scrutinize their online following. But the entire time is funny. I don't know how it would cost too much, but it would be such a good bit. I would love to hire these guys to investigate my social media presence. Oh my god!
Yeah.
But it's like when fucking coldest water bottle company wants to hire like Bella Porch to do an ad or something like that.
I don't know what any of those things are.
You got to get on TikTok more. That's then they'll go through like their darkest tweets and shit like that from 2009, whether or not they said a slur.
That's what that's what I
pay us to do. We'll do it for a tenth of the cost.
Yeah, it's funny because that's
we do that shit anyway.
That's what I've been like. I'm liking to imagine like a bunch of like fucking like CIA and Mossad guys watching like hours of like LOL epic Orbeez prank like videos and like just checking to see if they say the N-word or something.
Yes.
That's a great job. That is so easy.
Yeah. That's the least evil thing those people could be doing.
So, so simple.
But yeah, I mean, there's a little bit more to this here, but I guess I don't even need to read it. But it's they're expanding into. I wonder, it's funny, I was wondering if obviously they don't tell the social media influencer that they're doing this, but the really ominous thing is they mention a couple times ongoing monitoring. Like we're going to like look into their background, and then we're also going to, spy on them forever, just in case they,
well, firstly, I mean, that's like a ongoing billable hours.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like a good business model for them, because what if they say something? What if they do say a slur or whatever?
I mean, I guess that makes sense because like you can hire a private investigator to investigate anybody.
Sure.
So it makes sense for companies to be doing this with people who are associated with them, I guess, in like a very deranged way.
I got to see how much this costs.
Just send them an email.
I'm going to turn this. I'm going to hire Kroll to investigate all the haters.
Get a quote.
Get a quote. Yeah. So going back to Jules Kroll himself, after he sells Kroll Inc., right, that would be the part of the story where he could choose to retire to his country estate, or he could continue with his insane and sometimes illegal activities, and he chose the latter. Obviously. He did try to unsuccessfully, I don't remember if we mentioned this, he tried to unsuccessfully buy back Kroll Inc., and that did not work out. And after that, he formed K2 Intelligence, which is now known as K2 Integrity. Which is pretty funny. They sell themselves as this highly ethical firm for corporate espionage, and they have this ethos of quote unquote do no harm. He opened his first office with his son, not Nick, but Jeremy, in 2009. And just like we said about Kroll, they employ retired intelligence officers, freelance journalists, retired law enforcement to run covert operations. And if you look at their Wikipedia page, you can see some of the notable investigations they've helped with, like they worked on the case of that famous scam artist, the Hollywood con queen, and they also helped recover funds for some of Bernie Madoff's victims. A couple of things that are left out of the Wikipedia page, like they were also one of the firms hired to dig up dirt on Harvey Weinstein's victims.
Yes, they were.
Yep.
Yes, they were.
Wow.
And
I was actually hoping you would mention that. I was hoping you would mention that because I just did the Google search again. I was like Googling that last night. And if you Google Harvey Weinstein Kroll, the first couple hits are like Ronan Farrow's article. Like the first couple articles are about, Harvey Weinstein hiring Kroll to, investigate and discredit and intimidate his accusers. Right. But then after that, like the next one is John Mulaney, Nick Kroll, rip Harvey Weinstein at Spirit Awards.
Great. Wonderful.
Meanwhile,
his father,
he's literally, his inheritance is literally growing up because of Harvey Weinstein.
That's really upsetting.
That's really upsetting.
But yeah, so that's obviously left out of their Wikipedia page. And the other thing, which is one that really blew up, which is left out, is the multi-year spying operation they facilitated against anti-asbestos activists. And
oh, really?
I wanted to go into this as kind of like a little case study about the type of work that they do and what they get away with, which we've kind of already touched on, but I just thought it was a really interesting and particularly egregious case. Before I get into it, a little bit about asbestos. For those who are not familiar, it's a fantastic insulator. And because of that, it was widely used in all kinds of construction for a really long time until around the 70s or 80s, when we established that inhaling asbestos makes you very sick and or kills you. So it's illegal in a lot of places now. It's not illegal in every country. I think it's illegal in like 60-something countries. But it's still mined. It continues. There's over 1 million tons mined every year. The big producers are Russia, followed by Kazakhstan, China, and Brazil. And Asia ends up consuming most of this because most Asian countries have not banned it for use in construction.
Yep.
So naturally, there are a lot of activists and organizations campaigning against the use of asbestos because it does harm communities and people that have to work with it. And you can imagine the industry is very reluctant to admit the health risks or take any responsibility. They want to keep making that money. They want to keep mining it. They just want to keep it moving. One of the big organizations in this area is the International Ban Asbestos Secretariat. And I'll just read the little blurb from their website to tell you a little about them. The International Ban Asbestos Secretariat, or IBAS, established in 2000, provides a conduit for the exchange of information between groups and individuals working to achieve a global asbestos ban and seeking to alleviate the damage caused by widespread asbestos use. Such use may be largely historical in established economies of the West, but is continuing in developing nations. Since its inception, IBAS has been involved in co-sponsoring and supporting national and international conferences, furthering the above aims. In so doing, we have sought to counter the asbestos industry's control of the information stream and to provide a platform for victims to speak out against the injustices they have suffered. Through its coordinator, Lori Kazan-Allen, IBAS channels the views of a network of victims groups, medical and legal professionals, and concerned individuals. IBAS has a continuing role in raising public awareness of asbestos hazards and providing informed comment on current developments. So I looked around their site, and a lot of the work they do is around campaigning for funds for victims or raising awareness of policy issues. For example, like they had an article about a loophole that allows for asbestos mining and export to continue in Brazil, even though they actually banned the use of it there, which seems pretty reasonable. You know, that type of work seems important, reasonable. You don't want people to get sick. Unless, you know, if you're a group of oligarchs that owns a construction, oil, and gas conglomerate based out of one of those major producers of asbestos that I mentioned, Kazakhstan, then you might have a problem with that.
Oh, boy.
So for a company like Custo Group, organizations like IBAS pose a serious problem. What can they do besides hire a company like K2 Integrity to spy on the members of the organization and try to ruin their lives? So in 2012,
insane.
The Custo Group contracts K2, and K2 subsequently hires Robert Moore, a former TV producer and the brother of someone high up at the BBC, to pose as a documentary filmmaker and infiltrate IBAS. Moore had previously worked on reality shows that were mainly focused on pranking people, such as getting people to audition for a Survivor-style show called Lap Dance Island, which is like Survivor, but with lap dancers. I ended up looking this up because it sounded so weird, and I don't want to digress too much, but according to one article, they literally filmed people tearfully saying goodbye to their families because they thought they were like going to risk their lives on this island as if they were on Survivor, except there would also be lap dancers there.
Sick.
And they thought they just might not come back alive. And I couldn't find a clip of this. If anybody has a clip of it, please send it to me.
Oh my God.
So anyway, eventually, very surprisingly, Moore's TV career kind of falls apart, and he ends up living with his parents and working in gardening in his 40s around 2006. Luckily for him, in 2007, he runs into an old friend from the television industry at the beach. This friend had worked for Kroll Inc. and asked if he wanted him to make an introduction for him. So he very quickly starts working for Kroll Inc., helping with like basic fraud investigations, minor things, and then he also starts tackling cases where he needs to pose as a journalist, for example. According to one article, he also once disguised himself as a floral delivery man to get into a Russian oligarch's mansion. He kind of tells himself this stuff will make a good story. Like, he still very much thinks he's going to get back into the entertainment industry, and he thinks he can use this in like a documentary or like a show, whatever. And he says that he enjoyed the mischief of it because of that. And then eventually in 2011, he started working for K2 after they like transitioned over to that company. Kroll hired him again. And not long after that, he was asked to investigate whether American plaintiffs' lawyers handling asbestos cases were financing efforts by activists to ban asbestos. K2's client, supposedly a U.S. investor, was concerned that lawyers were trying to drum up lawsuits on behalf of foreign workers, and that they were kind of raising a panic about a totally safe type of asbestos that didn't actually cause mesothelioma, chrysolite asbestos. This is, by the way, not true. It's been proven to cause asbestosis and mesothelioma in workers exposed to it, their families, and people living around production facilities, just like every other type. It's not any safer at all. But Moore takes K2's word for it and believes them and wants to help them investigate this. He frames all of this as I thought we were doing good work.
Wild.
And that's when he suggests to Matteo Bigazzi, the top executive at K2 who brought him in on this, that he should go ahead and pose as a documentary filmmaker who's working on a series of films about dangerous industries, not just asbestos. This was documented in a memo. And it said, quote, "The advantage of going into this world with a bigger agenda than simply asbestos is that it might make my entry seem less deliberate." He added that he planned to win over the founder of IBAS, the woman whose name I mentioned from the website blurb, Laurie Kazan-Allen, by engaging her in, quote, "the most genuine and heartfelt way possible." And this totally worked. He was extremely successful. Kazan-Allen said that she really bought the whole thing. He became friends with one of her associates and then got himself introduced to her. And she's very prominent in this world of anti-asbestos activism. So it was a really important person to get close to. He started asking her for book recommendations and getting to know her. He would send her thank you notes about all their interactions. And he made sure to drop that his sister was high up at the BBC, which made him seem like a really legitimate filmmaker, right?
Right.
So she says that he was very charming and everything he said was totally believable. By mid-2012, he told her that once he was really up to speed about how the industry worked with her help, he would love to meet other experts and campaigners. And he asked her if she could help him get into a conference. She was totally unaware at this point that the reason he wanted to go to the conference was to see if those American lawyers they were investigating would be there. Among them, Laurie's brother, Stephen Kazan. When he didn't find anything at that conference, Bigazzi told him to head over to Thailand to keep spying on other asbestos activists. And supposedly, and please keep in mind that this is based on what Moore is saying in his defense after he's been caught and he's literally on trial. Supposedly, around this time, he realizes something isn't right and starts questioning things. He doesn't stop his work, which continues for 4 more years. He said he was starting to suspect that this wasn't a U.S. investor, which obviously now, because of court documents, we know that it wasn't. It was actually Custo Group. But he's saying he was misled by K2 and he didn't know what was going on. So Moore, who's a Buddhist, said at this point he discussed with his fellow Buddhists and decided that he could help Moore by staying on the inside as a double agent, and it could absolutely be done from a Buddhist perspective.
Insane shit.
It's really good. It gets so much better. He said it could totally be done from a Buddhist perspective as long as he didn't cause harm to anyone. He thought if he just walked away, they'd hire someone else who wouldn't be as kind to the activists as he would. Another possible reason he wouldn't walk away is that they were paying him 6 figures. Overall, he ended up making $600,000 off of spying on these activists, which is pretty good. Most people probably wouldn't walk away from that, Buddhist or not. From here, Moore was asked to monitor the World Health Organization, and he even gets officials there to finance him doing an anti-chrysolite asbestos film. The activists that he spied on think that he did this to enhance his cover, to make it seem like he really, really hates asbestos and get in really good with people who might have at this point been suspecting something was up otherwise. Again, he's secretly recording the activists the entire time and reporting back to K2.
Terrifying.
So, and the deeper he gets into those circles, the more that he can report back to K2. So, of course, he would do stuff to make himself seem legit, right? And this is where it starts to get kind of murky, again, because he's saying all this stuff in defense of himself. According to Moore, he was trying to put together exactly who was involved, since the name of the Custo Group wasn't public at that time, even to him. And he had found some inconclusive links. But supposedly, according to him, as of about 2014, he's fully a double agent. He says he asked activists to look into Custo and started contacting journalists and filmmakers about making a documentary with him about asbestos. He had this big idea about putting a film together and then outing himself as a whistleblower at an anti-asbestos conference and then sort of being hailed as a hero. Just totally delusional, thought that he could be hey, everyone here, I've been spying on you for 4 years, but I'm actually really good.
Jesus! Deluded.
So then in 2015, K2 offers him a different assignment. This time it's to infiltrate Global Witness. And you might remember Global Witness from our episode about dubious. They were one of the founding members of the Kimberley process. to eliminate conflict diamonds. And they were the organization that like really ended up criticizing De Beers and the whole process and saying like, this is bullshit. And they completely stepped away from it. So he's hired to infiltrate them. And it's for K2's clients, which were 2 oil producers at the time. I guess Global Witness was doing some kind of similar work as what they did with De Beers and kind of trying to do like ethical stuff. So in June 2016, he meets with the co-founder of Global Witness, Simon Taylor. They meet at a restaurant in a train station. So just like picture the scene and imagine from Moore's perspective that this is going to be like his really big dramatic moment. They sit down and Moore slides a book across the table, Agent Zigzag. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this book. It's a book about it's a book about a famous British double agent against the Nazis. Taylor says that Moore then said something to him along the lines of, if you know this story, this is what I want to do for you. Yeah.
Nobody can see that I'm doing like the Tucker Carlson face, but
Tucker Carlson face. So he tells him he's been working with K2 to spy on the asbestos activists. He basically like tells him everything and that he wants to be a double agent because he's a really good guy. Simon Taylor from Global Witness is like, what the fuck? Like, he obviously does not trust him. Like, he just told him he's been spying on activists for several years. So what Global Witness does as an organization is they tell him you need to immediately reveal yourself to the activists that you've been spying on. Like, you have to do that. And he's like, no, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? I thought I was going to be a double agent. Everybody was going to love me. So, of course, then Global Witness, when he declines, immediately contacts a law firm that ultimately sues K2 and Moore and Benghazi on behalf of the activists that he was spying on. Eventually, the way the lawsuit plays out is an undisclosed settlement. But Moore the whole time was essentially saying he was a good guy, never did anything wrong, never had bad intentions. He's gone back to prank comedy shows. Unclear what repercussions, if any, he's actually suffered from this, apart from whatever his part was in the settlement. I imagine K2 covered it. Of course, we know K2's operations are continuing, so they must not have been that affected by whatever they had to pay for spying on these private citizens for several years. And then in one article, when asked what the future holds for him, Moore is quoted as saying, "Do I strike you as someone who knows how to plan?" And I mentioned this to Shane, and he told me that's a quote. It's literally a line from The Dark Knight.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wasn't it like when fucking the fucking Two-Face was in the hospital and the Joker comes in and visits
I think
him?
so.
Yeah, I think that's what it's from.
Man, your plan.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
Yes.
I mean, I just thought this was an interesting little case study about the kind of work that they do and what they get away with. You know, similar to like how we've talked about defense contractors or like other big corporations, they kind of literally can get away with murder. They just like pay a fine if they get caught and the work just continues. Like K2 is probably spying on activists right now. Like almost certainly.
Yeah.
That's their line of work. They're going to keep doing it. And the next time they get caught, they'll just pay again and they'll just keep doing it forever.
Yes. Yes.
Unless
at some, because they just build that cost in. They just build.
Right.
Yeah. They bill that to the client.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, just if this happens, you just got to cover it, understand the risk, and they do their risk assessment. Yeah.
I mean, imagine if they paid this one guy $600,000 over a period of a few years. Imagine how much the client paid them. If the client is like a billionaire that runs a giant company.
Right.
I love that it's called K2, by the way. Like the fake weed I used to buy from a gas station when I was like on probation 10 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. This is some bad shit, guys.
It's not good.
It's dark. It's dark.
Like,
it's it's again like we've said before. It's like all this shit like it's a small club, and the more we no matter who we look into, it's always the same names that are gonna pop back up. But like especially with this one, like Kroll is like just a through line. From the 70s to today with like every fucking, the financial criminal and I'm just going to say global pedophile. Sure. Let's go ahead and say that as well. Just say it.
Yeah.
Just go ahead.
You know what? It's the truth.
It's weird.
And
it's weird that all these names come up.
And I wanted to say, too, like, this is obviously not exhaustive. Again, this is just like one case out of many. I found like a little blurb from a private eye magazine about them like hacking a private individual's email. Like, they're doing a lot of shit. This is not exhaustive at all. And it's not Kroll's only current business. I think you mentioned he has that bond rating agency.
He has a bond rating agency as well, yeah.
He's doing a lot of stuff. He's hustling.
fucking.
Well, it's funny too,
dude.
because like you hear him talk about the bond rating agency. It's like, again, he has to frame everything as if he's doing something good and noble, and like he started that because like the big three, bond rating agencies sort of were operating like a cartel and couldn't be trusted. That's his kind of explanation for it. When the fact that everything in the financial sector ended up that way was in part because of his services being provided in the 80s to like all the scumbags who made the current system the way it is. So
or literally being financed by AIG.
Right.
Yeah.
Which like leveraged the bad bond ratings to allow for their mortgage-backed securities to be fucking continue to be sold. Holy shit. Yeah, I wouldn't fucking trust a word of it. Are you shitting me? Of course not.
Yeah.
Oh Lord, man. Yeah, again, call me idealistic, but I don't think that multinational corporations should be able to hire a private, intelligence firm, a private fucking, CIA. Again, maybe that's a bit radical, but I don't see it personally.
Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to mention, and this is kind of on like a lighter note. In my research, I came across a Facebook page, and if anybody wants to check it out, it is on Facebook under the Kroll Con. It's Boycott Nick Kroll and Tig Notaro, and it's somebody who for many years has been posting about how corrupt
I think I also found this person. Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that you would love. So I just want to encourage everybody to take a look at that and look at some of the comments on there. And it is just really, really good stuff.
I found the Medium post, and I actually have it in front of me right now. I suspect may be the work of the same person, and the title of it is from 2018, and the title of it is, "Did Harvey Weinstein's fixers," and then in parentheses, Kroll, "fix the rating for son Nick Kroll's Kroll show? I sure think so."
Oh, that's the same person. Yeah. It has to be the same person.
I'm going to agree with that. Harvey Weinstein?
I think so. Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein fixed the ratings for the Kroll show. So
Prove he didn't.
All right. Allegedly.
Prove he didn't. That's all I'm saying.
Allegedly. Jeez. We came all this way, just like pepper in something actionable at the end. Yeah, I mean, it's just also just so funny, like when you see, a comedian like Nick Kroll, even fucking John Mulaney's dad and parents were like,
his dad is John
high-ranking lawyers.
Yeah.
John, it's John D. Laney and John M. Mulaney.
Sounds right to me. Prove it's not his dad.
That's true. Well, they're like probably like 12 years apart or something. But it's just also fun. It's so funny to me that like these rich kids just end up being Hollywood fodder. It's fucking crazy. Yeah, this is fucking bad. Again, like. And if it weren't for us just like stumbling upon this, like I don't see how this isn't like wildly talked about and shit like that. It's the private CIA. Yeah. It's insane. Like the breadth of the definition of like a management consultant should not include something like this. Like this should be outlawed.
Yeah.
Like it's fucking nuts. Obviously, like how is it regulated?
It's not. They can just do whatever. That's why I said we don't know if they're killing people. You get a bunch of ex-cops in a room.
All right.
Yeah. Well, hey, they're all going to have the same idea. And
hey, make sure to plant something powdery on them too, because it might get thrown out in court, but it'll gunk things up.
Like planting crack on T. Boone Pickens.
Yes, dude. Good. Damn. So what? Like they go home for fucking Thanksgiving, and like, how do you sit around a table and be like, "Hey, so son, how's the show going?" "Oh, Dad, it's pretty good. Yeah, I've got that weird cartoon about puberty." "Hey, how's things going in Sao Paulo with covering up for murder?" Jesus Christ! I should also mention that to say like in that New Yorker article, it said that he would that the dad Jules Kroll would show up to like Little League games in a limousine.
Oh, what a douchebag!
It's so funny. It's just, man, it's so douchey. Yeah. Anyway, I think we should. I think we've made our point.
Yeah. No more threats or accusations.
Accusations.
No. At any, just for the listener, at any one point, if you think you've gotten your handle on everything in the world and our political economy, just understand that there's a whole teeming underbelly of something that you don't know about that you should be afraid.
Be afraid. Yeah. Live in fear. Yeah. That's what we're saying.
That's the message.
Takeaway.
That's the message. God, what are we gonna close with for a song? I wonder.
The theme from The Dark Knight.
Oh, I think I got an idea. All right, folks. I think we should.
All right.
Should leave
Nick
it here.
Kroll killed Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh my God!
All right. Wow. All right. Definitely bleeping that one out. No, it's not. No, it's
true.
It's clearly
prove he did it.
All right, I'm
not
speculating with no basis in evidence that Nick Kroll killed Jeffrey Epstein.
Yep.
All right, that's for tomorrow. And
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Stay cool. Stay cool. Stay cool.